Tonight, we delve into ancient Rome to explore a different aspect than its successes or politics. Rome not only provided infrastructure and legal systems, but also executed some of the most bizarre and grim punishments in history. Before settling in, please consider liking the video and subscribing only if you genuinely appreciate the content. Feel free to share your location and the current time in the comments, as it's intriguing to connect with viewers worldwide. Now, lower the lights, maybe add a fan for some ambient noise, and let's embark on this evening's journey together. The grave fate of the Vestal Virgins reveals the extreme consequences of breaking vows in ancient Rome. Chosen at a young age to serve the goddess Vesta, these women played a crucial role in maintaining the sacred flame. A breach of their vow of chastity was not just disapproved of, but deemed a catastrophic event. Punishment for such transgression involved being buried alive. This form of punishment was chosen as Romans believed shedding a Vestal's blood was sacrilegious. Consequently, they resorted to this ghastly method of entombment as a loophole. The punishment included lowering the offender into a pit with minimal provisions, as spilling the Vestal's blood was considered an affront to the gods. When it came to dealing with matters like this, Rome had a rather straightforward approach. Seal her in and call it a day. By doing so, they could avoid any bloodshed, mess, or divine wrath. The unfortunate girl would be left to contemplate her life choices in darkness while Rome moved on. Interestingly, the men involved in such incidents usually faced a different fate, often meeting their end through public flogging. Despite the harsh consequences, becoming a Vestal priestess was considered a prestigious honor. It came with perks such as prime seats at games, luxurious travel, and even the authority to pardon condemned prisoners with a mere word. However, there was a significant catch. A single mistake meant being buried alive. Rome took this responsibility very seriously. For instance, Cornelia, a renowned Vestal priestess, vehemently denied accusations of misconduct during Emperor Domitius' rule. Although she boldly defended herself, her efforts proved futile, highlighting Rome's unwavering approach. In essence, Roman society was governed by strict rules and consequences, with little room for error. Take a moment to ponder your life decisions. Spoiler alert, they were not great. Next thing you know, you are sewn into a large leather sack. Sounds cozy, doesn't it? But it gets more interesting. Inside the sack with you are a loyal dog, a chaotic monkey, a regretful snake, and a doomsday rooster. The sack, now filled with bad choices and animal fury, is tossed into a deep river. The outcome? A chaotic blend of panic and poetic justice as the animals thrash and screech. The specific animals chosen were likely symbolic: dogs for family, monkeys for chaos, snakes for deceit, and roosters for vigilance. Essentially, living embodiments of your wrongdoings. Imagine the scene inside that sack. The monkey head-butting you, the snake coiling around your leg, the dog going crazy, and the rooster oblivious to the day of the week. If this scenario sounds like the worst escape room ever, you're not far off. Fortunately, such punishments were rare, but the Romans occasionally revived them to make a dramatic statement, particularly under emperors who enjoyed theatrics. It wasn't merely about executing the criminal. It was about sending a message, and perhaps shocking a few onlookers in the process. So, the next time your dad cracks a lame joke or forgets your birthday, be grateful you didn't live in ancient Rome. In those times, patricide didn't mean therapy, but rather confinement with a troop of creatures. This brings us to crucifixion, but with a twist, upside down, subverting the narrative of suffering. When we hear the word crucifixion, we typically envision a wooden cross, a painful demise, and a warning to dissuade challengers of the authorities. Rome's distinctive form of punishment was characterized by its brutal, public, and demeaning nature. Romans, with their knack for adding a touch of creativity, introduced the concept of inverted crucifixion. Yes, being hung upside down, as if the regular method wasn't degrading enough. This technique was typically reserved for specific individuals, often those the authorities sought to make an example of: criminals, traitors, and at times rebellious troublemakers, even in death. One of the most well-known cases of an upside-down crucifixion was that of St. Peter, a member of Jesus' apostles. Legend has it that when Peter faced crucifixion by Emperor Nero, he requested to be crucified upside down, stating he was unworthy to die akin to his Lord. Rome, with its efficient style, agreed to the unorthodox request. The inversion of the body during crucifixion intensified an already excruciating method of execution, causing blood to rush to the head, muscles to strain unnaturally, breath to become difficult, and intense pain. This alteration mirrored the distinction between enduring a mundane lecture and enduring that lecture upside down while enduring nail punctures in the ankles. This deviation was not merely about inflicting agony. It conveyed symbolism. The inverted cross paradoxically symbolized humility, with Peter's decision intended to express reverence rather than defiance. Regrettably, this imagery was later appropriated by horror films and heavy metal bands, giving it a completely contrasting image. The Romans were indifferent to the symbolism. Their objective was to send a clear message: oppose us, and we'll ensure your demise is as peculiar and unforgettable as possible. So, the next time you find yourself casually contemplating, in ancient Rome, punishments were transformed into theatrical displays, where even death penalties were orchestrated for dramatic effect. Decimation, a unique form of punishment, was like a team-building exercise laced with distress. Unlike a typical motivational speech about unity, the Romans emphasized marching as one, or facing the consequence of losing 1 out of 10 soldiers. This process of decimation was a severe military penalty, making modern boot camps seem luxurious in comparison. When a Roman unit demonstrated cowardice, attempted desertion, or mutiny, the commander would resort to decimation as a last resort to instill fear and maintain order. The soldiers would be lined up, and every 10th soldier chosen by luck would be bludgeoned to death by their comrades as a show of loyalty to Rome, creating a brutal scenario reminiscent of a survival challenge with no winner and lasting psychological scars. The survivors did not receive praise or respite afterward. They were given inferior rations and forced to camp outside the fort as a symbol of disappointment. The calculated rationale behind decimation was to instill fear in soldiers, ensuring they feared repercussions from within their ranks more than the enemy they faced. Surprisingly, this harsh approach proved effective in maintaining Roman discipline and unity among soldiers. One of the most notorious instances of decimation occurred when Cassius, a wealthy general who joined forces with Julius Caesar and Pompey, used it to discipline a disgraced unit following a defeat in the Spartacus slave revolt. This act symbolized getting back on track after failure through an internal punishment. So, if your boss emphasizes the need to enhance team accountability, consider yourself fortunate to not be subjected to Cassius's methods. In ancient Rome, failure was not just penalized, it was shared among the group. Imagine living in the later years of the Roman Empire, a period marked by increasing strangeness, darkness, and a preoccupation with heresy. If you dared to challenge the church or question sacred beliefs, Rome did not simply reprimand you. It bestowed upon you an unforgettable accessory known as the fork of heretics. Visualize a metal bar with two prongs, one positioned beneath your chin and the other inserted into your upper chest, restricting any movement of your head. Every slight motion could result in a sharp jab. This device was designed not to cause immediate harm, but to mentally, physically, and spiritually drain you over time, testing your endurance and willpower. Standing for days with every muscle tensed so as not to impale yourself was akin to a grueling game of self-control. The device, known as the heretic's fork, was not only used for heretics, but also for blasphemers, witches, suspected liars, and those who annoyed bishops. It was a versatile tool of torture, designed for silence, stillness, and extreme discomfort of the soul. To add a dramatic touch, the fork sometimes had Latin inscriptions such as "I renounce my sin," or "I am guilty," as nothing speeds up a confession like being slowly pierced by words. Surprisingly, this punishment was rather mild in the eyes of Rome, serving more as an introductory lesson for sinners, with no bloodshed or public executions, just silent suffering and inner turmoil. A crash course in agony, a beginner's guide to heresy. Imagine holding back a sneeze continuously for 3 days, with metal prongs pressing against your throat. In Rome, silence wasn't just preferred. It was enforced with a pair of rusty prongs and a crick in the neck, courtesy of the gods. Thrown from the Tarpeian Rock, Rome's original unfriend button. No passive-aggressive texts or social media unfollows here. In ancient Rome, betrayal of the state didn't result in being cut off. Instead, traitors were hurled off a cliff. Welcome to the Tarpeian Rock, an 80-foot drop on the southern side of Capitoline Hill, just a stone's throw from the Roman Forum. It wasn't merely a scenic spot. It was where the Republic disposed of traitors by forcefully launching them off the cliff edge. The rock was named after Tarpeia, a Roman girl who betrayed the city to the Sabines in exchange for what she believed to be shiny gold bracelets. The Sabines, being literal thinkers, promptly crushed her with their shields, instead of honoring the payment agreement. Her body was thrown off the cliff, and the cliff was given her name. The lesson here is not to trust intrusive groups or unclear payment terms. Subsequently, the Tarpeian Rock was embraced by Rome as a favored method to punish traitors, corrupt officials, false witnesses, and those deserving severe consequences. There were no hangings or sword executions, just a brief flight and an abrupt halt. The guilty were often stripped, displayed, and then led to the edge where gravity determined their fate. Usually, there was a crowd witnessing it all. Nothing like a public execution to liven up market day. It was a public, definitive, and symbolic act. It meant more than just death. It meant physical and spiritual expulsion from the city. Rome's ultimate form of cancel culture. Interestingly, The rock was located near Jupiter's temple, meaning those who deceived the gods or the state had a close view of heaven in their final moments. As time passed, more elaborate punishments emerged like lion attacks, crucifixions, and burning tunics. But the Tarpeian rock remained a timeless choice. It was simple, yet powerful in its message. So, when someone says they were thrown under the bus, remember the Romans did it first. A reminder of stone and betrayal resonating through the hills. Death by lion, with optional applause. Welcome to the Colosseum, where stone, sweat, and 50,000 cheering spectators fill the arena. Ancient Rome's version of entertainment. Today's highlight: damnatio ad bestias, or the act of being devoured by wild animals while the audience enjoys snacks. This form of punishment was frequently utilized in Rome for criminals, betrayers, prisoners of war, and, sadly, Christians who refused to worship imperial deities. It's important to understand that this wasn't simply about death, it was also about creating a show. Rome didn't believe in dull executions. They preferred grandeur. The condemned individuals were thrown into arenas where ferocious animals like lions, leopards, bears, or even elephants awaited them. Rome, staying true to its nature, often adorned the victims with costumes prior to their demise. They turned these deaths into theatrical performances with moral lessons. For instance, one unfortunate person might be clad as Orpheus only to be attacked during their solo act. Another might portray a mythological villain such as Prometheus, only to be pecked by birds in a realistic reenactment. This display was a combination of entertainment, justice, and religious indoctrination all at once. You may wonder if they had a chance to defend themselves. The answer is no. This wasn't a legal proceeding. It was a predetermined death sentence, with the crowd cheering on. The spectators reveled in the sight of blood, in case the lions were not cooperative. Romans had methods like prodding them with hot irons or starving them beforehand. The show had to continue. It's worth noting that this fate wasn't reserved solely for serious criminals. One could find themselves in the arena for minor offenses like theft, political disagreements, or religious infractions. The only barrier between an individual and becoming lion food was the favor of a benevolent emperor. However, it's crucial to understand that this wasn't mere cruelty. It was a strategic move. It served as a warning to all observers. Deviate from the norm, and you could meet the same fate. Rome governed through fear and ferocious predators. Eventually, the Christian martyrs shifted this narrative by transforming violent death into a symbol of bravery. But for most, damnatio ad bestias was less about fame and more about brutality. So, the next time you grumble about jury duty, be grateful it doesn't involve dressing up as a mythical character and evading leopards. In ancient Rome, when facing a death sentence, individuals of high social standing, like senators or nobles, were sometimes obligated to commit suicide as a form of punishment rather than being executed publicly. This practice, known as forced suicide, was a way for the emperor to maintain a facade of honor and dignity. If someone offended the emperor, perhaps by plotting against them or displaying too much confidence, they would receive a discreet message instructing them to take their own life by a certain deadline, or face a more brutal alternative. Participating in forced suicide was seen as a noble act, allowing individuals to control their own fate and preserve their family's property. This method of punishment was considered a respectable way to end one's life, often involving a ceremonial process like taking a warm bath, cutting one's wrists, and delivering a final speech. Prominent figures like the philosopher Seneca the Younger were subjected to forced suicide, showcasing the dramatic and solemn nature of this ritual. Accelerating the process wasn't an act of suicide, but rather resembled a morbid chemical test. Coerced self-destruction under the guise of choice was essentially authorized by the state, a deceptive display of power disguised in the illusion of honor. Rome presented a facade of dignity while quietly eliminating individuals without a trial, public spectacle, only the sound of running water and the complicit silence. If you've ever felt your employer was subtly uncooperative, envision an official invitation from a Roman courier to self-destruct. Rome didn't always resort to killing. On occasion, they permitted individuals to self-destruct in a graceful manner. The uncomfortable chair complaints of today are nothing compared to the inventive punishments of ancient Rome, such as the notorious wooden donkey, also known as the agonizing pony of doom. This contraption, resembling an A-frame with a sharp apex, subjected those condemned, typically thieves, slaves, or rebellious soldiers, to straddle it with their full body weight applied directly on the sharp edge. In some cases, weights were attached to their ankles, intensifying the agony as gravity took its toll. The longer the individual remained seated, the more excruciatingly the beam lacerated their flesh, with some left in that position for extended periods. While the wooden donkey likely originated from earlier Middle Eastern torture methods, the Romans embraced it with their characteristic flair for elaborate punishments. This punishment was not always fatal, but always involved a spectacle. Public humiliation was used effectively as a means of punishment. Imagine a scenario in a bustling square where a deceitful merchant is perched on a donkey, crying out loud as children giggle and vendors sell snacks. This spectacle served as both a dramatic performance and a valuable lesson. In addition to this, Roman generals utilized this method of humiliation as a form of discipline in the field. Disobedient soldiers would find themselves seated atop a donkey, reminding them to obey orders, as nothing quite reinforces morale like the threat of internal injuries. Variations of this punishment existed, with some donkeys made of metal or equipped with spikes. There are even accounts of a heated donkey, suggesting Rome was receptive to feedback and willing to adapt on the go. This punishment was not only degrading and harsh, but transformed the simple act of sitting into a lifelong physical and mental scar. So, the next time you find your office chair uncomfortable, take solace in the fact that it's not a sharp triangle, and no one is tying rocks to your feet. In ancient Rome, individuals faced more significant challenges than just bad posture. Instead of modern methods like ID cards or background checks, Romans relied on a clear and direct way to identify criminals: branding. Unlike contemporary branding, which involves logos, this practice entailed permanently marking the individual's face as a label of their crime. Whether you were a thief, runaway slave, or repeat offender, being branded meant you now sported a visible sign warning others not to trust you. Branding was typically conducted by pressing a heated metal rod onto the skin, leaving letters like F for fur, thief, or C for calumnia, false accuser, seared onto the person's forehead or cheek. Imagine the ancient Roman equivalent of receiving a one-star Yelp review etched onto your skull. This branding didn't happen discreetly behind closed doors. Instead, it was a public event, a spectacle meant to shame the wrongdoer and deter others from committing similar acts. The aim was not only to punish, but also to convey a powerful message that would be seared into the flesh. Picture living with such a mark. Every person you pass in the marketplace recognizing your transgression, securing a job becoming a challenge, and any attempts at flirtation being futile. You no longer retained your identity. You were now defined by your crime. Escaped slaves were particularly targeted for branding, typically marked with the letters FUG, indicating their status as runaways. Repeat offenders faced more severe branding or other forms of punishment. Slaves were not just possessions. They were expected to bear their infractions as a visible emblem. Some individuals attempted to conceal or alter their brands through various methods like cutting, tattooing, or using makeup. But such actions were punishable under Roman law. Attempting to erase your brand was akin to trying to edit a criminal record. It was simply not allowed. In later times, emperors like Constantine suggested placing the brands on hands or legs rather than the face. But the underlying purpose remained unchanged: to enforce lasting shame. So, when someone tells you to face the consequences, be grateful it's a figurative statement. In ancient Rome, your face not only reminded others of your wrongdoing, but also bore the literal mark of it. Similarly, if you committed blasphemy, you risked having your tongue removed, rendering casual conversation a thing of the past. In ancient Rome, the freedom of speech came with conditions. While discussing topics like the emperor, philosophy, or poetry was permitted, any disrespect towards the gods or the ruler could lead to severe consequences. The act of removing tongues in ancient Rome was both literal and horrifying. It was a method of permanent silencing for those whose words were deemed dangerous. This brutal procedure involved no anesthesia or sterile tools, only forceps, iron, and excruciating pain. Whether a soldier or executioner, they would clamp, cut, or even rip out a person's tongue as a form of state-approved censorship. Blasphemy against the gods, or speaking out against the emperor, could lead to this punishment, showing that powerful individuals could silence dissent with a single word. Surviving such an ordeal left individuals unable to speak clearly, defend themselves, or even cry out in pain, creating isolation through mutilation. This extreme measure was a clear message of those in power asserting their dominance over others. In ancient Rome, they took it seriously. When your bones turned into art, they resorted to using the wheel as a method of punishment. The Romans always seemed to find new and inventive ways to inflict pain on individuals. The wheel, also referred to as the breaking wheel, or the Catherine wheel in medieval times, was not just an execution method, but a form of creating a grotesque sculpture using the human body. The condemned would be tied to a large wooden wheel, their limbs stretched out resembling a human starfish. An executioner would then use a heavy iron bar to systematically break the victim's limbs, all while keeping them alive to prolong their suffering. The ultimate goal was not immediate death, but to shatter the bones and contort the body into a twisted display of agony. The broken body would be entwined through the spokes of the wheel, creating a nightmarish, macabre structure, sometimes displayed atop a pole, or allowed to spin gently in the wind for added effect. This gruesome practice served as a brutal warning to the public, reserved for heinous crimes like murder, treason, or robbery, showcasing the consequences of crossing societal boundaries. Survivors were rare, but in the twisted event that someone did live through the ordeal, they were sometimes left to suffer further. In ancient times, criminals were sometimes spared a quick death and instead faced a final blow to the chest or neck. This brutal practice continued in medieval Europe, where it was taken to new heights with the addition of spikes, fires, and elaborate scripts. The Romans laid the foundation for such executions. So, the next time you feel like your daily commute is difficult, just remember that you're not tied to a wooden wheel as the main attraction in a public display of bones. In Rome, justice was not blind, but rather bold, brutal, and meant for maximum visibility. They had various creative ways of executing people, such as death by hot ash, causing a slow and excruciating burn. Emperor Nero, known for treating executions like a form of art, introduced this particularly gruesome method involving pouring scorching hot ash down a person's throat, suffocating them slowly and painfully. It was a cruel and terrifying way to die, unlike the more well-known methods like crucifixion or being thrown to the lions. Externally, all may seem stable, but internally, everything is deteriorating. It is a demise caused by dust and suffocation, masked as silence. The choice of using ash in executions was degrading and lacking dignity. Ashes represented the aftermath of destruction, utilized to eliminate impurities and erase any remnants of burnt objects. Perishing in ash symbolized insignificance, being not even deserving of a noteworthy death, but rather a gradual dissolution of what remained. Such punishment was rare, specifically bestowed upon individuals Nero held immense disdain for, aiming to erase their presence discreetly, yet inflicting maximal psychological torture. Although seemingly unremarkable to onlookers, lacking bloodshed or screams, the sight of a person in a pit being covered by a trickle of gray dust signified a sinister practice in Nero's Rome. The concept of ashes to ashes, dust to dust, was not merely poetic, but a standard procedure in that era. Rome saw the introduction of the dreadful tunica molesta, or the flammable death robe, which brought about fatal wardrobe malfunctions for individuals. In ancient Rome, one's attire typically did not result in death unless one was clad in the notorious tuna molester, an apparel we could liken to a flammable death robe. Imagine being escorted to an arena or bound to a post, only to be approached by an executor holding a tunic. Initially relieved at the thought of being provided clothing, you soon realize that the garment is not wet with water, but soaked in pitch, tar, and oil. The tunica molesta, translated as the annoying tunic, was essentially a highly combustible nightmare onesie. This clothing was drenched in flammable substances, snugly worn by the victim, and then set ablaze while the individual was still alive within it. This method of execution was not just a means to end a life, but a macabre public spectacle, famously employed during the reign of emperors like Nero, who turned executions into forms of perverse entertainment. Nero's extravagant garden gatherings featured a macabre spectacle. The tunic molester used to light up the grounds with human torches, embodying his sinister version of Roman leisure. Individuals such as arsonists, traitors, Christians, and those singled out for dramatic demise were chosen to wear it. The flames would mercilessly consume them, burning their skin hair and lungs without any chance of extinguishing the fire, as the tunic adhered to their bodies. Ever keen on mythological references, Rome sometimes styled it after Hercules' poisonous garment that inflicted excruciating suffering on the hero. Rome's executions were not merely about death. They added a poetic touch by showcasing victims in agony, engulfed in flames for the onlookers, reinforcing the consequences of defying the empire. Reports even suggested that music accompanied the gruesome spectacle, with Nero playing his lyre while the flames danced higher. So, next time you feel discomfort in your attire, remember it pales in comparison to being clothed in oil as part of a public execution in ancient Rome. In Roman punishments, most ended with the body, but the concept of damnatio memoriae went further, seeking to erase individuals from history intentionally, whether it was an emperor, general, or senator who had fallen out of favor. Rome not only executed, but sought to eliminate all traces of them, defacing or destroying statues as part of this chilling punishment. Inscriptions meticulously erased, portraits painted over, your name eradicated from official records, coins, and landmarks. If you had accomplishments, they were reassigned. If you had allies, they were silenced. What's most devastating is that it was successful. Many individuals who underwent damnatio memoriae were influential, famous, and feared. Yet today, their names are forgotten because Rome excelled at expunging their existence. Entire reigns disappeared into obscurity. It's a form of historical erasure. A prominent case was Emperor Gator, brother of Caracalla. After Caracalla had him murdered in their mother's presence, no less, he didn't stop there. He commanded the removal of Gator's likeness from all mosaics, paintings, and sculptures. Countless inscriptions were altered, his name obliterated by hand. In some remaining artworks, traces of Gator's image can still be discerned. Fragmented faces, incomplete figures, names half erased. It's eerie, as if history is being deliberately forgotten. However, damnatio memoriae wasn't solely about revenge. It was about maintaining power. By altering the past, Rome could shape the future. If they could make it appear as though someone never existed, perhaps their ideas would vanish too. It was the empire's method of declaring that you were never present, and if anyone dared claim otherwise, they would suffer the same fate. This concept also holds a chilling relevance today. While we discuss cancel culture and reputations being tarnished in our society, Rome was executing it 2,000 years ago, just with tools instead of social media posts. As we conclude this unusual exploration into Rome's most peculiar forms of punishment, remember this: the most severe penalty wasn't fire, wild animals, or execution. It was the silence that ensued, because in ancient Rome, being forgotten was the ultimate torment. In the early 1800s, the American frontier expanded boundlessly westward, untouched and mysterious, whispering, enticing promises to those courageous enough to pursue them. The East, bustling with cities, factories, and vanishing farmland, started to feel confining. However, the West was a vision, a vast canvas with a sprinkle of danger to make the paint adhere, originating as faint murmurs in taverns, churches, and dining tables, tales of expansive landscapes, rivers glistening like silver, and valleys flourishing effortlessly spread. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 had more than doubled the size of the fledgling United States, introducing newfound, boundless territory that seemed unclaimed. To many, the West symbolized not just a geographical direction, but a fresh beginning, a realm where your past debts didn't define you, and no one cared about your origins, only your capabilities. It beckoned both visionaries and outlaws, farmers seeking fertile grounds, widows yearning for serenity, and adventurers pursuing legendary tales spun around campfires. With no established routes, no assurances, and no safety nets, embarking on a journey westward was shrouded in uncertainty. Could the wagons withstand the rugged mountains? Would the rivers freeze prematurely? Would sustenance await on the opposite side? Nevertheless, despite the risks, tens of thousands ventured forth. Entire families, with infants wrapped in flour sacks and grandmothers nestled amidst crates of preserved meat, ventured into the unfamiliar expanse. Moving westward equated to staking everything on chance, as remaining behind felt like submitting to a life circumscribed by boundaries. The frontier wasn't merely a geographic term. It epitomized a trial of determination, perseverance, and the capacity to bring order to chaos using solely timber, metal, and unwavering optimism. As the sun dipped below vast prairies and mountain ranges, casting lengthy shadows, it symbolized the end of one day's journey and the beginning of another's challenges. As shadows fell across wagon wheels and tired faces, it became evident that America's tale was still unfolding. Progress was slow, inching steadily westward, with each rickety mile representing a step towards an uncertain future. Before embarking on the untamed frontier, pioneers needed to construct a conveyance that would transport not only provisions, but also their hopes and dreams. The covered wagon emerged as the essential vehicle for the westward journey, devoid of opulence and resembling a wooden box on wheels, bound by determination, sweat, and iron nails. Rather than crafting wagons from scratch, families often purchased or adapted existing carts. While the renowned Stoga was popular, the frontier demanded something smaller, lighter, and more affordable. Thus, the prairie schooner was born. Its canvas top, billowing like a ship at sea, traversed the grassy plains, carrying essential supplies such as salted pork, flour, beans, and household items. Every available space was utilized, as even a slight increase in weight could jeopardize the durability of the oxen pulling the wagon. These sturdy beasts of burden, the oxen, were the driving force of expansion, resilient, albeit slow and obstinate. Families found shelter in, under, or beside the wagons, abandoning the notion of privacy. Contrary to cinematic portrayals, passengers did not remain seated all day inside the wagons, opting to walk for miles through grueling conditions. These wagons were not merely modes of transportation, but rather lifelines, housing essential supplies like medicines, spare parts, ammunition, and seeds. Some even accommodated baby chicks in boxes beneath the wagon bed to establish a poultry farm at their destination. Once the family had established themselves, their wagons took on a deeper significance beyond just being practical vehicles. They were seen as symbols of hope and opportunity, representing a new beginning once the oxen were harnessed and the journey began. Leaving behind their sold home and the land they once owned, they set out on a path filled with challenges and optimism for a better future. Each obstacle faced along the way, whether it was a bumpy road, a broken axle, or a muddy river crossing, added a unique chapter to the story of America's expansion. etched not in words, but in the imprints left by wagon wheels and sheer determination. Despite the romanticized image some may have, life on the trail was demanding, exhausting, and engulfed in dust. Days started early with the sounds of leather harnesses creaking and wagon wheels turning, acting as natural alarms in place of roosters. Progress was slow, covering only about 10 to 15 miles a day, subject to weather conditions and the unfortunate task of repairing broken axles. Trails like the Oregon, Santa Fe, and California routes gradually formed as pioneers left behind their belongings, broken wheels, and the graves of those who didn't survive the journey westward. Meals were basic, repetitive, and hearty, with luxuries like coffee and clean water being scarce commodities. Contaminated streams posed health risks, making boiling water a necessity if resources permitted. Rations included preserved meat, hardtack, dried beans, and occasional wild game if hunting was successful. Sickness posed the greatest threat on the trail, with diseases such as cholera spreading rapidly through camps, often proving fatal within hours. Home remedies and sheer hope served as the only form of medical assistance, despite the occasional loss to illnesses, injuries, or snake bites. Nevertheless, amidst the hardships and trials, there were fleeting moments of optimism and unity. The journey along the trail was filled with joy, as children amused themselves with sticks and stones, or skipped happily in the wagon's shadow. Weddings and births occasionally occurred, forming families not only by blood but also through shared challenges and strong bonds. At night, the wagons gathered in a circle, not just to ward off native attacks as often portrayed, but to protect against thieves, animals, and chilly winds. In these moments, fires were lit, bread was baked on hot stones, and sometimes a fiddle would appear, bringing laughter and music that briefly pushed back the darkness. However, rest was always short-lived, as the next day meant more walking, more wilderness, and fewer assurances. Life on the trail was about surviving through daily routines, learning to cherish your boots and despise your blisters, to grieve silently yet keep moving forward, as the land kept pushing westward without pause. After weeks or even months on the trail, the sight of trees, water, and open land was a cause for overwhelming gratitude that could make a pioneer fall to their knees. However, the elation of finding a suitable spot for settlement was brief, as the real labor of homesteading awaited. This endeavor lacked glamour, with no pre-built homes, fences, or roads, just raw land and the relentless passing of seasons. Building shelter was the primary concern, usually a modest one-room log cabin barely accommodating the family that constructed it. Tools were scarce, and each log had to be felled, shaped, and transported by hand or oxen without the aid of modern tools or precise plans. Most cabins had earthen floors that turned muddy in rain and froze solid in winter. Windows were often simple openings, covered with animal hide or greased paper, allowing light in while keeping out the cold. A chimney was considered a luxury. In the early days, cabins were simple structures with holes in the roof to release smoke, causing inhabitants to cough frequently. Families slept on straw, furs, or corn husks inside, with beds consisting of rope on wooden frames. Some cabins were well insulated with mud and moss, while others let in the biting wind. The first winter was a challenging time, testing families' preparedness with the threat of starvation or frostbite looming if firewood and food supplies ran low. Snowstorms could leave them stranded for days as wildlife howled in the darkness. Despite the harsh conditions, the pioneer spirit persisted as families made do with animal fat candles, mended clothes, and cooked over open flames. They found solace in reading the Bible by firelight and sending letters home when possible. Surrounded by few neighbors in the vast wilderness, newcomers were welcomed with shared resources like roof-raising events, livestock loans, and warm meals, highlighting the importance of community cooperation for survival. The first frontier winter not only tested physical endurance, but also the strength of dreams and determination amidst isolation. On the American frontier, resilience was not solely about physical strength, but also about enduring hardships, making sacrifices, and displaying quiet yet unwavering bravery. Frontier women exemplified these qualities, shedding the image of delicate heroines and embracing roles as versatile and indispensable figures in the community. From the moment they arrived, these women juggled responsibilities as builders, farmers, midwives, butchers, doctors, and educators, rising before dawn to attend to tasks as the backbone of frontier life. Before most men even opened their eyes, women on the frontier were already busy baking bread, milking cows, gardening, making clothes from scratch, caring for livestock, preserving food, and treating illnesses with herbal remedies. They also assisted in childbirth, acting as midwives for themselves and their neighbors. If needed, these women could defend their homestead using weapons like rifles, axes, or frying pans, even while holding a baby on their hip. Loneliness was another challenge they faced, with neighbors miles away, and communication through letters taking weeks or months. Despite these hardships, frontier women played a crucial role in shaping civilization. One stitch, one lesson, one loaf of bread at a time. They were the heart of the community, organizing events, caring for the sick, and advocating for schools, libraries, and law in budding towns. These women were not just background characters, but the backbone of the frontier, showcasing strength, resilience, and determination that should never be forgotten. So, when you think of the Wild West, remember the image of a woman with her hair pinned back, sleeves rolled up, a shotgun by the door, and cornbread baking in the oven, embodying the spirit of perseverance and fortitude that characterized frontier life. The American frontier was not empty, as there were numerous indigenous nations who had resided on the land for centuries, establishing deep connections to the Great Plains, the Pacific Coast, and other regions. Despite being filled with native life, hunting grounds, and sacred sites, the U.S. government and most pioneers viewed the land as potential rather than home. This mindset led to a series of broken promises, as the government signed treaties with native tribes guaranteeing peace, land rights, and resources, yet continually pushed tribes back through various means such as ink, fire, and bullets. Many tribes were eventually forced onto reservations, far from their ancestral lands, leading to displacement and cultural suppression. Despite facing challenges like the Black Hawk War, the Sand Creek Massacre, and Little Big Horn, indigenous peoples persisted by preserving their languages, traditions, and stories amidst the cultural erasure attempts. Westward expansion was not just a land grab, but also a systematic effort to erase native identity and civilization. Triumph and tragedy marked the American frontier. Pioneers showed resilience, yet displaced others, revealing the complex history of the land. law enforcement was scarce in newly settled towns, lacking police, courthouses, and jails. Legal matters often favored the powerful, whether through influence, speed, or gang support. Vigilantes took control initially, forming citizen committees to address crimes swiftly. As settlements expanded, lawmen like Wyatt Earp and Wild Bill Hickok emerged, some valiant, others corrupt. Outlaws such as Billy the Kid and Jesse James added to the frontier's allure, becoming notorious figures. The frontier's justice system was erratic, with vigilantes and lawmen maintaining a delicate balance between order and chaos. One could face hanging for horse theft or be acquitted for murder if the jury found their story more compelling. Bribes and threats were effective. Justice was often about retaliation and appearances. The courtroom, if present, sometimes resembled a store with a multitasking judge. Despite the disorder, frontier communities gradually established legal systems, with judges replacing vigilantes and prisons replacing crude punishments. However, the old legends persisted, possibly never fading. On the frontier, justice was not impartial, but armed, dusty, and quick. Initially, the American frontier progressed as slowly as a wagon wheel, noisy and weather-dependent. By the 1800s, the tranquility of the prairie gave way to the clamor of steam whistles as the railroad arrived, altering everything. With the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869, the frontier transitioned from wilderness to a bustling trade route east to west. It attracted settlers, with towns sprouting near new depots overnight, and goods now arriving swiftly by train. The railroad ensured survival for pioneers, enabling faster access to medicine, expanded markets for crops, and swift communication through telegraph wires. The frontier became less of a leap of faith and more of a calculated risk, transforming into a place where progress and connections flourished. The introduction of instant communication transformed the frontier in unprecedented ways. In Wyoming, a rancher could now receive news about a presidential election in minutes, while a sheriff could call for assistance from a distance of 100 miles. The fear of isolation, which early pioneers greatly feared, was gradually fading with each beep of the telegraph. This had significant effects on various aspects. Economies flourished, government extended its reach, and law enforcement operated more efficiently. However, not all welcomed this change. Indigenous tribes perceived the arrival of railroads and telegraph poles as infringements on their land, signaling the encroachment of wires and parcel ownership. Some resisted by disrupting communication lines, causing train derailments and slowing down progress. Despite these challenges, advancements continued to prevail. The unstoppable locomotive enabled rapid growth in towns that it served while leaving others to decline. The wilderness diminished with each passing mile of rail, fundamentally altering the once isolated and untamed frontier. By the late 19th century, a significant transformation had taken place. The distinct boundary separating wilderness from settled areas, known as the frontier line, had gradually vanished. Consequently, in 1890, the U.S. Census Bureau officially acknowledged the absence of a frontier line, signifying the closure of the American frontier. This marked the end of the westward expansion era, as forests were cleared, railroads connected the nation, wildlife like the buffalo neared extinction, and indigenous tribes were confined to reservations. The vast and enigmatic land had been surveyed, charted, and commodified by the acre. while some celebrated this as a triumph, viewing it as the realization of a dream with a continent conquered and a nation united from coast to coast. Others, particularly native communities and displaced groups, viewed it as a time of great upheaval and loss, the end of the frontier marked by erasure, loss, and a silence where homelands once existed. It was more than just a geographical shift, but a transformation of identity. The rugged individualism, myth of the lone pioneer, and campfire tales of heroism endured, now immortalized as legend. Scholars like Frederick Jackson Turner argued that the frontier had deeply influenced the essence of America, shaping its democracy, resilience, and spirit of adventure. Americans learned to adapt, survive, and depend on themselves and their communities thanks to the frontier experience. The cowboy, log cabin president, and gold rush prospector emerged as iconic figures ingrained in the national narrative. However, the reality of the frontier was a mix of sweat, dirt, disease, bravery, brutality, hope, and injustice. Its legacy encapsulates these contradictions, reflecting the complex nature of American history. Today, the frontier lives on in the spirit of exploration and the American ethos of pushing boundaries in various fields like land, science, and space. While the frontier may no longer physically exist with wagons, cabins, and trails now transformed, its essence endures in the stories passed down from those who ventured beyond. The American frontier didn't disappear. It transformed into the cornerstone of the nation's identity. Before the advent of musical instruments, there existed rhythm. It was the beat of a foot on the ground, the clap of hands, and the thump of a heart in a still chest. Music did not originate from wood, string, or bone. Rather, it began with the human body and breath. Millennia ago, predating writing, agriculture, and architecture, early humans discovered the extraordinary power of sound. In caves, plains, by fires, and in forests, certain movements such as stomping, shouting, or whistling were found to evoke emotions, attract attention, or soothe fear. Music is not merely a cultural creation, but rather a biological instinct. Picture a small group of hunter-gatherers gathered around a flickering fire. One person starts humming a soft, rising tone, another claps in rhythm, and a third mimics bird calls. There are no words, only sounds. In that moment, they transform from individuals surviving the elements to a connected human group. Sound itself was considered sacred before musical instruments like flutes or drums were invented. Many anthropologists believe that early music originated from imitating animal calls for hunting or mimicking natural sounds for communication. Gradually, sounds evolved from being utilitarian to expressing emotions. Rhythms conveyed more than just signals. They became a language of feelings. A simple hum turned into a lullaby, a shout transformed into a song. Some speculate that music predates language and may have coexisted with it. Babies today instinctively respond more to melody and tone than speech. Our innate connection to pitch, rhythm, and vibration suggests that music is ingrained in us. Music was not invented, but rather rediscovered. Interestingly, these initial sounds were not exclusive to the elite or the talented, but were shared universally among early humans worldwide. Music existed in Africa, Asia, Europe, wherever there were voices, hands, and objects to create sounds. Before the first flute was made or strings were tuned, humans grasped that sound had the power to touch the soul. This was just the start. In the frosty landscapes of Ice Age Europe, amidst roaming mammoths and carving glaciers, in the land, a subtle revolution occurred, not involving tools or fire, but centered on sound. Deep within a cave, an ancient human stumbled upon a hollow bird bone, carefully pierced holes into it, and blew. A clear, eerie, purposeful tone ensued. This was no coincidence. It marked the inception of musical instruments. Researchers have found bone flutes dating back more than 40,000 years, positioning them as among the oldest musical tools on the planet. Unearthed at locations like the Hohlfels Cave in Germany, these flutes were crafted from vulture wing bones or mammoth ivory. These were challenging materials to manipulate, yet their creators painstakingly added finger holes at exact intervals, enabling a variety of notes. This precision communicates something profound. This wasn't haphazard. It was music, organized, reproducible, designed for expression. The question remains, why did they do it? Perhaps the sound imitated bird calls, a connection to the natural world. Maybe it complemented ceremonies, marking life transitions or seasonal changes. Alternatively, it's plausible that someone fashioned a flute with the sole purpose of creating beauty amidst darkness. It's common to perceive early humans as primitive, focused solely on survival. But the flute suggests otherwise. It symbolizes creativity, a mind that perceived potential in a bone beyond sustenance. These instruments also hint at communal ties. While a flute played in solitude produces music, in a group setting, it generates rhythm, harmony, and a collective experience. Gathered around a fire, flutes may have harmonized with voices, clapping, or drumming on logs and stones. The music would resonate, bouncing off cave walls, marking the initial concerts in human history. Furthermore, consider this. These Ice Age flutes precede the development of agriculture, the wheel, and even writing. In terms of innovation, music emerged early, not. The flutes of the Ice Age were not merely considered a luxury, but a necessity. They served as more than just tools. They conveyed emotions like joy, sorrow, mystery, and were part of rituals. These delicate remnants from ancient times still have the power to evoke emotions within us today. Humanity created music from bone and breath. If the flute represented our initial form of expression, the drum symbolized our heartbeat. Before the existence of cities and rulers, groups of people congregated beneath the stars, clapping, stomping, and infusing rhythm into the earth. The drum did not originate in a single location, but emerged organically across various continents and cultures, as though the human body and the planet itself yearned for synchronization. Early drums were likely constructed using simple materials like stretched animal skins over hollow logs or clay pots. They were utilized not only for rhythm, but also for ceremonies, communication, and asserting authority. A drum beat had the power to call upon a deity, lead armies, or assemble a community. It was more than just noise. It functioned as a signal. In Africa, some of the oldest drumming traditions date back tens of thousands of years, with drums transforming into instruments capable of articulating tonal languages, mimicking human speech. In Siberia, shamans utilized drums to enter trance states, with their rhythms unlocking pathways to the spirit realm. In the Amazon, the resonant sound of water drums reverberated through the forest, resembling thunder produced by human hands. What made drums indispensable was not solely their sound, but their universal appeal. Melodies were not a requirement, nor was formal training. One simply needed to sense the rhythm. Drums were present in various occasions such as births, funerals, weddings, harvest celebrations, and conflicts, providing order amidst chaos. A beat could unify a community, enhance a ceremony, or ready warriors for battle. It communicated, "We are united." Even during early agricultural practices, drumming played a vital role. In a specific location, farmers used sticks to scare birds away, and celebrations after the harvest included dances accompanied by drum beats. Drumming not only indicated time passing, encompassing not just hours, but also seasons, cycles, and changes. As time progressed, drums underwent changes, with people incorporating carvings, paint, and spiritual symbols to their instruments. The drums were not merely practical tools, but were regarded as sacred items symbolizing fertility, protection, or a connection to the divine. These instruments served as a way to connect individuals across various barriers, such as language, generations, and worlds. Before the existence of clocks, electricity, or writing, rhythm was essential for counting and emotions. Drums brought life to sounds, making time more tangible. And in their rhythmic beats, individuals found not only music but also significance. With the transition of humanity from caves to urban centers, music advanced from a survival ritual to a sophisticated form of art. This transformation was particularly noticeable in ancient Mesopotamia, known as the birthplace of civilization, where rivers carved out kingdoms and the written language was developed. In this region, music began to exhibit grace and elegance. Within the temples and ziggurats, some of the earliest representations of stringed instruments like harps and lyres can be found on tablets, engraved on walls, and even interred with kings. These were not simple bone flutes crafted discreetly. Rather, they were meticulously made and embellished with materials like gold, silver, and lapis lazuli, showcasing beautiful curves matching their melodious tunes. The harp, in particular, became a symbol of sophistication, spirituality, and monarchy. A notable archaeological find in a city dating back over 4,500 years revealed the exquisite bull-headed lyre buried alongside a noblewoman's tomb, adorned with gold inlays and crowned with a golden bull's head. This instrument was not just a musical tool, but a tale told through wood and strings. The early harps from Mesopotamia lacked frets or fingerboards, requiring strings to be plucked by hand, resulting in fixed tones. Despite this limitation, these harps emitted a distinctive atmosphere. The sound of the drum echoed gently, softly, like a whisper. Its melodies lingered in the atmosphere, reminiscent of incense, imparting a reverent and dreamy quality. Music in these ancient cities was structured, with musicians undergoing training and musical elements being meticulously documented. The harp held significance in various aspects of life, from ceremonies to storytelling to astronomical studies, as scholars connected stars with harmonies, believing the cosmos resonated with celestial intervals. The presence of harps in burial grounds in Mesopotamia hints at a profound belief that music transcended death, serving as a conduit for the soul. It served a greater purpose beyond mere entertainment, acting as a spiritual framework bridging realms. Unlike the thunderous beats of drums or the primal refrains of flutes, harps introduced a novel essence to music, one of intimacy, gentleness, thoughtfulness, and intentionality. It allowed for introspection, providing a medium through which the Mesopotamians captured the essence of silence and birthed the earliest tunes of civilization. In ancient Egypt, music wasn't just an art form. It was considered a divinely bestowed language. The Egyptians venerated music as a celestial offering, with mythological tales attributing its inception to the goddess Bat, later merging her with Hathor, the deity of joy, fertility, and music. Music transcended mere melodies to become intertwined with rituals, identity, and spiritual structures resonating within temples, tombs, and marketplaces. Unlike the primal flutes of early times or the ceremonial harps of Mesopotamia, Egyptian music fused ritualistic precision with daily life, with laborers harmonizing their work on pyramids, fishermen serenading the Nile, and priests reciting hymns. During sacred ceremonies, women express themselves through frame drums and rattles during pivotal life moments like childbirth and funerals, marking beginnings and endings. Iconic Egyptian instruments included harps, lutes, lyres, cymbals, and flutes, each evolving from their simple origins into sophisticated musical tools. From angular designs to large, curved, ornamental pieces with elongated, arched necks, these instruments symbolized status as much as music. Some of them featured up to 22 strings, crafted with such grace that they still appear vivid in tomb paintings after 3,000 years. Among these instruments, the serum held a special position, a peculiar type of rattle with metal rods that made jingling sounds when shaken. It was closely linked to goddess worship, especially of Hathor and Isis. The purpose of the sound was not just for entertainment, but rather to rouse the divine, dispel evil, and safeguard the soul during rituals. Not all musicians in Egypt were common folk. Some were priests or priestesses who served in temples through their musical talents. Others were court musicians who entertained pharaohs and foreign dignitaries with melodies praising gods, monarchs, and lineage. Music served as a bridge between different realms. During funerals, songs and chants guided the soul through the underworld. Wealthy tombs often contained verses and even depictions of instruments and musicians, ensuring that the departed would be accompanied by music in the afterlife. To the ancient Egyptians, music was transcendent. It paid homage to the deities, united the populace, and reminded them of the cosmic harmony. In Egypt, musical rhythm was not disorder, but rather the rhythm of the universe's pulse. For the ancient Greeks, music was not merely an artistic expression, but a science that delved into the soul and the cosmos. While other societies employed music in rituals and festivities, the Greeks pondered a more profound question. Why does music stir our emotions? Their answer did not lie solely in poetry or philosophy, but in the realm of mathematics. Enter Pythagoras, the philosopher famous for his geometric theorem, who also played a significant role in the development of music theory. Legend has it that Pythagoras walked past a blacksmith's workshop and observed something peculiar. The sound of hammer impacts varied depending on the size and weight of the hammers, prompting an investigation involving strings. Through this, he learned that when a string was divided into simple ratios such as 1.2 or 2.3, it produced harmonious tones. This discovery led to the concept of the harmony of the spheres, suggesting that the cosmos operated on mathematical ratios, with music reflecting universal order. Each plucked string was not merely a note, but a representation of heavenly bodies. Greek instruments, such as the lyre, symbolized civilization and learning, often seen in the hands of poets like Homer and Sappho. The aulos, a double-reed pipe, provided contrasting emotive tones used in dramas, rituals, and sometimes in war. Music in Greece was closely linked with ethics and values. Plato believed that different musical modes could impact the soul, instilling courage or laziness. He emphasized the importance of rigorous musical education in shaping exemplary citizens. Music was viewed as more than entertainment in Greece. It was considered medicine, morality, and perfect mathematical vibrations, resonating in the physical and auditory realms. The Greeks established the groundwork for music theory, notation, and acoustics, with their insights into intervals, scales, and harmony, influencing Roman, medieval, and modern musical thought. In Greece, music transcended mere sound, serving as a conduit between intellect and emotion, between numerical precision and aesthetic appeal, a space where the spirit could both reason and soar. While Greece contributed philosophical depth to music, Rome provided a platform for its exuberant expression. In the Roman society, music was valued for its functionality, structure, and power, accompanying various events such as festivals, religious rituals, gladiator competitions, and notably, battles. Music served as a connection to the divine for the Greeks, while for the Romans, it functioned as a tool for maintaining order and expanding their empire. The cornu was a renowned instrument of Roman authority, a large, curved brass horn resembling a letter G, and often taller than the soldier who carried it. Used not for musical harmony, the cornu instead served to convey commands, signaling troop movements, battle charges, and retreat orders amidst the chaos of war. Roman generals managed warfare not only through vocal commands, but also through orchestrating the sounds of battle using instruments like the cornu and the tuba, a straight trumpet that could penetrate the noise of combat. These instruments were crucial in keeping the Roman army, known for its discipline, synchronized and coordinated. Picture the scene of tens of thousands of soldiers marching in unison to the resonant calls of these ancient horns, creating a sense of psychological warfare alongside organizational strategy. While military music played a significant role in Roman society, it also had other functions, such as accompanying sacred rituals in temples with double flutes known as tibiae. In arenas, music heralded the beginning of gladiator games, similar to how a modern national anthem precedes a sporting event. During banquets, the atmosphere for elite guests was set by musicians playing lyres and hydraulics, an early form of a water-powered pipe organ. Music permeated every aspect of Roman daily life like wine, being structured, performative, and indispensable. Although the Romans drew inspiration from Greek music, they adapted it to suit their own beliefs and values. While the Greeks focused on individual expression and introspection, the Romans emphasized public displays and control in their musical traditions. Music functioned as both entertainment and propaganda for the Romans, encompassing a wide array of influences as they absorbed sounds from various regions they conquered. The music of Rome evolved into a diverse mosaic, blending African rhythms, Eastern melodies, and Mediterranean instruments in a continuous process. However, unlike Greek philosophers, Roman intellectuals wrote sparingly about music theory, preferring to engage with music practically rather than delving into theoretical analysis. The impact that Rome had on music was not a mystery. It was a process of amplification that reverberated throughout its empire, reaching even the most distant provinces with the beat of its drums. While the western territories marched to the rhythms of empire, the eastern regions delved into the essence of sound. In ancient India, music was more than just an artistic expression. It was viewed as a conduit to the divine. Originating from the Vedas, among the oldest sacred texts known, Indian music started as chants. The Samaveda, in particular, comprised hymns intended not only to be recited, but sung. These chants followed intricate melodic arrangements, known as sman, aimed at raising awareness and aligning the universe. As Indian civilization progressed, so did its musical instruments. For instance, the veena, an early string instrument, became associated with Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge and arts. The mridangam, a drum shaped like a barrel, maintained the tempo during sacred performances. Every musical note and rhythm was interconnected with ragas and talas, which were believed to evoke specific emotions, times of day, and spiritual states. Music was not just a form of entertainment. It served as a form of discipline, meditation, and a means to balance inner energies while connecting with the eternal. On the other hand, in ancient China, music was considered equally sacred and had political significance. According to legend, Emperor Shun, one of China's mythical 5 emperors, used music to harmonize the empire. Chinese philosophies, especially Confucianism, propagated the idea that proper music could lead to moral conduct and societal order. The right musical compositions were believed to create harmony not only within the individual, but also within the state. Instruments were meticulously crafted to represent cosmic equilibrium. For instance, the guqin, a 7-stringed instrument, was played in solitude by intellectuals and wise individuals. Its gentle and contemplative tones aimed to mirror introspection and virtuous qualities. The sheng, a reed instrument played by blowing air through pipes, symbolized unity through its cooperative sounds. The banjong, a bell set with different-sized bronze bells, was also part of this intricate musical tradition. A collection of bronze bells was traditionally utilized in royal courts to symbolize hierarchy and ceremonial order. Chinese musical compositions were meticulously tuned to precise mathematical intervals that harmonized with natural rhythms, aligning humans with celestial phenomena. In India and China, music was not treated as distinct from existence. Rather, it was viewed as life itself, reflecting the universe, serving as a moral guide, and embodying a sacred rhythm. Unlike Rome, which used music for conquest, Eastern civilizations employed it to reach the divine, communicate with nature, and connect with the inner self. From the resonance of bone flutes in ancient ice caves to the gentle hum of Mesopotamian strings, from Egyptian cymbals beckoning deities to Chinese zithers soothing emperors, music has always transcended mere amusement. It functions as a universal language, existing prior to empires and persisting long after their decline. The enduring appeal of music lies in its ability to tap into the emotional core of our existence, offering solace, warnings, excitement, unity, and mourning. A lullaby soothes a crying child, A funeral drum conveys what words cannot express, and a national anthem stirs emotions before a battle or a sports match. Music is instinctive, capable of stirring emotions across continents. Its adaptability allows it to withstand colonization, migration, conflicts, and revolutions, with instruments crossing oceans, songs changing languages, and scales evolving, while rhythm, tone, and expression remain constant. Throughout history, music has been utilized to establish group identities, be it tribes, nations, religions, or movements. Yet, it has also served as a means to transcend these boundaries, fostering collaboration and connection. Music transcends linguistic barriers, requiring only receptive ears and a compassionate heart. The act of listening is now supported by modern science, validating what ancient knowledge had sensed. Music has the ability to change brain activity, alleviate stress, and evoke memories. Individuals with Alzheimer's disease, despite losing their ability to recall words, can still remember tunes. Soldiers utilize sound to manage traumatic experiences. Infants react to calming songs even before they can communicate verbally. Music has evolved into a form of therapy, a medium of expression, a form of worship, a commercial entity, and an integral part of existence. In a world divided by language, faith, and geography, music remains a consistent element, a fundamental part of human identity that dates back to our earliest ancestors, who created melodies using bird bones and rhythm using stones. Despite advancements in artificial intelligence, space exploration, and technology, music serves as a link to our roots, highlighting our emotional, intellectual, and imaginative nature. As long as we exist, we will continue to create music, because long before we crafted narratives, we embraced sound. It is sound that made us human.